Peace and blessing, family. It's your man Maarifa, and welcome to another Maarifa moment where knowledge is reborn. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, yeah, we black. Your man Maarifa is black yet again. Man, we got us a great topic for today. We talking about West Africa. Yes, indeed. We got to get into West Africa today, man. But before we do all that, you know how we do it. We got to get our admin notes out the way. So dig, check it out. Look at this banner right here. You see it scrolling across the screen. We need you to like, subscribe, follow, and share all of our social media platforms at where? Maarifa Sar LLC. That's right. We on Instagram, Facebook. We even on TikTok. Go and check us out over at Maarifa Sar LLC. Join and subscribe and follow today. Second thing we need you to do, rush over right after this video is over. Go over to maarifasar.com and get you a fly fresh hoodie. Get you a jogger set. Go and get you some tees, some hats. Get something fresh and fly for the winter time. You dig? We got 15% off holiday discounts throughout the holiday. So take advantage of those sales while they last. You know what I'm saying? So now that that's out the way, are you ready for the lesson for today? Well, let's go. All right. West Africa. Let's get into it. All right. So we've been following this whole series, the African studies, you know what I mean? And we've been taking a look in these Maarifa moments at all the accomplishments and achievements and travel that the ancient Africans have had over the many, many centuries. We're talking about the historical origins of African people and the true history of Africa and African people and what really happened. So we're concentrating on this particular topic for today, West Africa, and we're going to talk about the many many different riches and things in the region of West Africa and the accomplishments that they had. Some of the kings and the queens, we'll concentrate on those, but we'll get into a lot of it. But as you see here on this map, you'll notice that there are different names associated with Africa. Africa had their own, names in which they named their lands. You have names like Kemet for Egypt, Kush for Sudan, Wagadu for Ghana, Mali. So Punt, down there. You see a lot of different African names. The white European colonizers, the Romans, the Portuguese, the Arabs, the British, they all came in, conquered the African lands, and then they divided up the borders according to their, conquests and killed off a lot of African people and stole their lands, and they changed the names to what you see modern times today. But we're going to concentrate on certain areas that we have identified here, and we're going to concentrate on Mali, Ghana, Songhay. Well, Ghana, Mali, and Songhay in that order. And then we're going to touch on a little bit of Angola as well. But looking at that region, if you look back in the ancient times, the griots were the oral storytellers of the tribes, and they kept all of the history for their tribes. So in West Africa, the West African griots would keep the history, and they would teach generations and generations of babies that were being born about their ancient ancestors and their elders who passed on before them. And they would tell the stories of how the accomplishments and the achievements that their people had achieved and the greatness and things of which they've done for that particular tribe. Okay. So the ancient griots would tell all of the stories, and they had them in Ghana, in Mali, and Songhay. Now, in West Africa was rich in very many resources, okay? Most particularly gold, salt, and iron. Iron ore was very prevalent in that area. So they were trading those resources out with eastern parts of the country, of Africa, as well as other, international exports. So those resources were very, very, prominent in making Ghana into a mighty nation. Okay, so Ghana rose into a mighty nation. They started as the Mandi speaking people, which is the Mandinka tribe of Ghana, which was the western part of Sudan. Okay, so these were basically the descendants of the Sudanese. Here we are with the Nubians again. The Nubians, who are the Sudanese, the western part of them had migrated west and then developed the Ghana area. Okay, so they went out there and they started developing the lands in Ghana, and they started speaking a language called Mandi, which they came up with a tribe called Mandingo. And we're familiar with the Mandingo tribe from hearing that term with the movie, Alex Haley movie Roots, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So you see right here where Mali had became so powerful because they had these blacksmiths. The blacksmiths were very important because they were creating, all type of tools with the iron ore to be able to, fashion these tools to use for agriculture, buildings, you know what I'm saying? They were doing also weaponry with these iron ore pieces, so iron became a very popular and rich source, which was used to not only build their land and culture, it was also used to protect them, their village and their tribes. Okay, and the blacksmiths were very important because they were the ones who had the ability to form these particular items through the fire to be able to create these tools. Okay, and the blacksmiths had this what do you call it, um not a tradition, but a mystical thing about them. They, had a reputation. That's the word I'm looking for. They had a reputation about them where people knew the traders that were coming in and out of West Africa had a fear of the blacksmith because they had this mystical type of science that they understood how to smold and mold and make these weapons, which they more than likely got from Nubia, the science from the Nubians, the Sudanese, because they were using, tools like that as well. So that cultural knowledge had from the Nile Valley had traveled with them west, where they took that knowledge and information with them. So when you had traders coming in, like the Arabs, that were coming in trading and stuff like that with the Africans, they were seeing that these blacksmiths had this talent that was far superior to anything else, and it was some far advanced tools that they were using, to farm the land and with agriculture and stuff like that, and also for weapons. But you'll see some of the tools that they had created there. These are some of the ancient tools that they use to carve, stone carvings, to also aggregate the land, to also build, housing and structures and things of that nature, and to also, like I said, with weapons. But the blacksmith was someone powerful. And you notice they kept the spiritual traditions in West Africa along with the same cultural, spiritual system that they had in the Nile Valley in Sudan and Nubia. They worship, the African deities, and you can see here they're paying homage and reverence to Hathor, you know what I'm saying, the mother goddess, and you can see with the cow heads and stuff like that. So they paying tribute to Hathor, which is the mother goddess right here, the Egyptian goddess Hathor. You know what I'm saying? So and you can see here that still carried those tradition with Queen, Sheba. She was also venerating and paying homage to the ancient Africans. You see right there with the sun disk and the horns, that's Heru, which is Hathor. They call Heru. But you see right there, she's holding on to the scepter, you know what I'm saying? The scepter of life. And we still have those traditions in Africa that are passed along from generation to generation, paying homage and venerating our ancient ancestors. Okay, so Ghana became a very powerful nation after, the trading back and forth of, the minerals and resources that they had in that region with the Arabs. And they had kings who ruled in that land, and Tutankhamun was one of those kings, and he was very powerful king who came into existence. And his particular rulership, you know, there was a lot of Ghanaians who were very smart. They were, well taken care of, and he made sure that they wasn't poor, and he was taking care of the people. So he became a very powerful king, and he was taking care of a lot of different, protection of the land and keeping traders from coming in and, taking over the land. they was making sure they was protecting Ghana and that region, ensuring that they kept, the powerful trade routes and the resources under African control. Okay, and they were keeping it out of the hands of the Arabs who were trying to bring in Islam as their religion to convert African Ghanaians into Islam. But Tutankhamun would not allow that to happen. He continued, to follow the, spiritual guidance of his ancient ancestors, and they practiced, the ancient spiritual African systems from the Nile Valley. And you can see right here the trade routes on this map. It'll show you, the Ghanaians are going on horseback, sending, resources back and forth, and you had traders coming in that from came from Arab, nations and things of that nature from the west, I mean from the east rather, and they were trading like the salt, they were trading the gold and also the iron ore from that region, which was very prevalent in, Ghana, West Africa area. They had a abundance of it. A lot of different areas were, producing it, so they was able to push those resources out and maintain their economic power in that region because they had so much of those resources, plenty of it, in abundance. And they also kept, the traders from coming in and invading because they were near the Sahara Desert. And the Sahara Desert was very much hard to travel, and you had to travel by camel, horseback, in order for you to get through the desert. And it took a lot of dangerous tolls for travelers and traders to come through. That's why they had specific routes to get in and out, because if you got off of those routes, it would cause you to, to pretty much, meet your death or your doom demise, because you had so many days without water. And if you haven't traveled with camel, then your water supply would run low. That's why they needed to use the salt in order to replace the perspiration and sweat in which they lost from traveling back and forth from that region. But the Niger River was also in that region as well, and the Niger River is something that the Africans, the Ghanaians, they navigated those rivers, and they traveled back and forth using those rivers as well on boat. So you see here, you remember the story Roots, Kunta Kinte, they made the Mandinka tribe, famous on television with the movie Roots, Alex Haley's movie Roots, and everybody remembers Kunta Kinte, and he was caught and captured in West Africa and brought over to Americas on a slave boat. That's according to the story, in the movie. But the Mandinka tribe became very powerful, and the Mandinka tribe, the Mandinka warriors, had grew in numbers, and they were pretty much tribal resistant. And when they had their tribes, and when they grew in numbers, there was two tribes in particular, the Susu and the Suniki. Suniki and the Susu had gathered together and came together under power, and Ghana was pretty much going through a period where they were being heavily, recruited by Islamic missionaries. So the Arab missionaries were coming in trying to convert, African tribes along the trade route to convert over to Islam. But, you know, Tutankhamenon wasn't having it. He wasn't allowing his people to convert, and they wasn't going to convert to Islam in order to continue to trade because they held control of the resources. But when those particular political battles were going back and forth, and the missionaries were coming in, putting that pressure on the Ghanaians, trying to convert them to Islam, that weakened some of their, army and stuff that they had. And then the Susu and the Suniki were rising in power, and they saw an opportunity for them to take over, and they did, with the warriorship, and they became great in power, and they took over the Mali, I mean the Ghana Empire, and it became Mali. So they had took over the region, and they took over from the Ghana West Africa region and the Mali after they had came together and pretty much took over the power for Ghana into Mali, changed it into Mali. Mali then took over. But they had the iron which was very prevalent And that iron was used, like I said, for weaponry, to create an army for them to go out and protect their lands, and then also for them to take over. But it was very, very, resources that iron ore was something that was like a technology that changed, history pretty much. So that technology was a little bit of, it was like more of a better tool than wood, traditional wood and stone and things of that nature. That iron was a little bit more lasting, and it had more, impact as far as like, agricultural base, and then also, weaponry, which changed the whole impact and how people, interacted and dealt with each other. So here are some of the tools and the weapons in which they used, to protect themselves. You know what I'm saying? The Mandinka tribe of Mali, and how they grew in power and took over that region of West Africa. Now, when they took over, they had some differences. So the Susu and the Suniki had tribal wars. So the tribal wars were going back and forth for several years. They were trying to take control, who was going to take control of what, but they had split into 12 different tribes, and each one had their own independent chief, and those independent chiefs were battling with each other until one day they came up with, a council, and they decided to pretty much put their differences aside and then put in charge a Musa. So the Musa was like the king of all of the different tribes. So the Musa was a title for the king. And the Musa was like, pretty much the one who was in charge. And like I said, he was the ruler of the Mali Empire and stuff like that. So the councils came together and became the Musa. Now, one of the famous Musas that was, that was in the Western Africa area was Sudiata. Sundiata was, one of the powerful rulers. He was a warrior king, and he went out and protected West Africa from Arab invaders. The Arab invaders were coming in with the Islamic movement, and they were trying to, commit jihad on the West African region, but they had a difficult time doing so because of the desert, the desert region of the Sahara, and they wasn't able to navigate the Niger River like the Africans were with the boats. And Sundiata was, pretty much the warrior king who protected the people and kept them from being converted into Islam. He wouldn't allow that to happen. He would, keep them, away from it, and he maintained the traditional customs and religions of his ancient ancestors, like Tutankhamun did. And they pretty much ruled similarly. Tutankhamun, ruled Ghana, and Sundiata, was the Munsa for Mali. You know what I'm saying? So, but he still maintained those Sudanese, Nubia cultures and traditions that his ancient African ancestors had brought with them from the Nile Valley, okay, in West Sudan. So the Arab slave trade occurred in about, I want to say about 1000 AD, somewhere around there. So 1000 to 1200 AD, the Arabs started to come into Africa, and they were trying to bring Islam to the region, and they were pretty much using force to convert Africans into Islam. It was either you accept Islam or you die. So they couldn't get it through economic means. They couldn't get the Africans to convert that way because they had, the control of the resources. And the Africans wouldn't accept, the traditions. I mean, they would not accept Islam as a religion because they kept their own African traditions, from their ancient ancestors. So they would practice their own African ways, and they had control of their own resources. The iron, the salt, and the gold was plentiful. The Arabs did not know where the mines were kept, and the Africans didn't expose that information to them and give them that, knowledge of where that those mines were kept, so they couldn't come in and take the mines from them by force. So the Arabs would send, missionaries in to try to convert Africans. But when that didn't occur, then they started to do, things by force. So they was going on the trade routes, and they were coming in with certain, mercenaries, and mercenaries would come in and capture Africans and go into the slave trade, and they was trading Africans back and forth. So slavery was a part of another part of the resources that was going on. Certain tribal Africans were taking part of the African slave trade, and they were giving, these Arab slaves for, you know, particular resources and things that they needed. They were trading back and forth, so they would trade slaves as well. And these slaves that the Africans were giving off to the Arabs were enemies of those tribes. Okay, so they wasn't pretty much giving away anybody. They was giving away people that they had fought against, different, tribes that they fought against, and they were captured, and they were enemies, considered enemies of those tribes. So then they had traded those Africans off as slaves to the Arabs. And then eventually it grew to a point where the Arabs were able to come in to a certain point and started stealing and taking Africans from the trade routes. Okay. And you see right here the missionaries coming in on camel and trying to convert the Africans to Islam. That was one of their, tactics that they used to try to bring Islam in. And then you see the slave merchant, he was coming in trying to, trade back and forth, and then they was trading slaves in exchange for goods, and things that they had provided from the east. And then eventually it grew into a slave trade by force. Okay, so you get into the next Musa, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was one of the most famous and the most richest Musas ever lived. So he had a lot of gold resources in when he controlled Mali. You know, after the death of Sundiata, Musa came in. He became Mansa Musa became the Musa of Mali, and he was one of the most, famous Musas that they had, and most powerful and richest Musa that was there. He had a lot of gold, and then you see right here on the map where the European traders, Portuguese, were coming in, and they was trading with Mansa Musa in the region. They said he had so much gold that it was just like, he adorned himself in gold everything. All of the people in, Mali was wearing gold because gold was so prevalent in that region, but he controlled all the mines, the gold mines, and he knew exactly where they were. And, he wasn't giving that information out, and he wasn't exposing that to, none of his trade partners or nothing like that. But one thing that Musa did, he converted to Islam. And he converted to Islam. I don't know what his reasons were, but he converted to Islam, and his economic, wealth went through the roof because now he had more influence in the East, in the Arab world, as opposed to just the Western region of Africa. So his influence grew even more, and his stretch of power had grown his territories even further with his conversion to Islam, and that also caused a lot of his followers, or his people who were under his rulership, to convert to Islam as well. So there was a split, between the tribes and stuff. The Mandinka tribe, they kind of split. Some of the Susu tribe, the original Susu tribe, stayed with the African traditions, spirituality, and the cultural customs, and they rebelled against, the Islamic influence and Islamic conversion that Musa had implemented for the rulership and the throne. Okay. So after Musa and Mali had, went out, Song had rose to power, and Sunni Ali was one of the powerful, kings of West Africa. Song. So it went into succession. Ghana was powerful first. That's Wagidu. Wagidu was Ghana pretty much, and then Mali came into power after that, their kingship, and now you have, Song coming into power. And then Sunni Ali was, the leader and the ruler of, Song. And they took over Timbuktu. Timbuktu is one of the most, the second most, powerfulest educational institution in Africa, next to the ancient Egypt, Alexandria library. They have, all of the historical written um, literature from Africa in Timbuktu. Okay, the Timbuktu region had all of the literature that was written down for African history, African culture, African knowledge, African wisdom, the griots, all of the stories was written down and it was put into scrolls and put into the Timbuktu, and the University of Timbuktu was educating the African people. A lot of people came to Timbuktu to learn, and that university was most powerfulest educational university. They had scribes to write all of the literature that they needed to educate the people, and they were teaching them, how to, speak. But a lot of that influence came from Arab nations, where they was giving them Arabic as a means for them to write their knowledge down. So the Islamic influence had some to do with their literature. So in West Africa, so they were using the Arabic language for them to write down information from their scrolls. But Sunni Ali, he pushed back from Islamic rule, and he didn't allow the Arabs to come in and control the region, and he protected Songhai and Timbuktu and the Western African region. And you can see here the building of Timbuktu and University. There you have all of the written scrolls that are still maintained and kept preserved over in that region today. And they try their best to preserve all of the knowledge and the writings and things. And the Africans are protecting it over there right now to this day in West Africa. And you can see that they're keeping everything conserved and preserved. And this is a picture of what it used to university used to look like in Timbuktu before they ruined it. The Europeans had destroyed it, came in. But you see, the books are still preserved, and a lot of the writings and the scrolls are still there, hidden. A lot of it is hidden. They have to keep it hidden and protected in order for the people from who are trying to rob and steal the education and the knowledge, from looters and stuff like that, from coming in, taking the knowledge and destroying it. Okay. Another part of West Africa we want to discuss, after we took a look at Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, one other powerful region was Angola. Angola had a very, wealthy, you know, prominent uh, era that they had also as well. But this one was particularly unique because they had a queen, rulership, a monarchy, a monarchy. It was a matrilineal rather society as opposed to patrilineal, like you see with the kings. And the queen that was ruling that area was Queen Nzinga. Queen Nzinga was a warrior queen. She had fought back the Portuguese, and she defeated them, the Europeans, from coming in and colonizing Angola in the west area. She was so military strategic that she had defeated the Portuguese and the Europeans for several years before her death, and she had kept them at bay and kept them away from Angola area, while she kept economic trade routes, with other parts of Africa, eastern parts of Africa, as well as Sumeria region into Saudi Arabia, into those areas. While she was keeping the trade economics going and keeping those things going, she was also protecting from invaders, European invaders coming in from Portuguese and Europe, from keeping taking her land. But Queen Nzinga was very powerful. You know what I'm saying? So she gave a lot of cultural reference to Africa, and she gave power to women to be able to be more than just the providers of the home and stuff like that. She gave them hope that they can be leadership and in leadership and powerful as queens as well, so that they too can be empowered themselves to believe in themselves, to be more than what they just there to serve other men. Okay. And you can see the powerful and beauty of these women in Angola, and the traditional garbs that they have here and things that they wear. And you see around the neck, They have the rings and things that they stretch around the neck. Very cultural African customs. Beauty that you see there. And Angola today is a very modern city. After the Portuguese came in and eventually invaded and conquered, Queen Nzinga after her death, they took over, the Portuguese took over, and they pretty much colonized the area. But this is like in 2021. You can see the area is very, modern and industrialized and beautiful in Africa. A lot of people think Africa is all bush and, jungle and all of that stuff like that. But no, you have some modern cities, just like you see here in America, over in Africa. You know what I'm saying? They have the beautiful beaches, the highways and the tall building structures that they have in the building. So Africans been building for centuries. So we have that technology, and some of that is prevalent in the Great Wall of Benin. Then Benin is like central West Africa, but it's still in that area of Benin where the Great Wall of Benin is one of the largest walls ever created. Actually, is larger than the Great Wall of China, has stretched a little bit further as far as the mileage is concerned, and is taller. So the Africans have a great architectural structure technique that they use, and they have a skill set that they use in order for them to build structures that are lasting in stone, okay, over several centuries and years. And you can go today to see the Wall of Benin in the year 2021. If you travel over to Benin, Nigeria area, you can go and see it to this day. Now I want to talk about the Dogon tribe of Mali. The Dogon tribe is one of the old ancient tribes that pretty much have connection with Egypt, Kemet. Okay, and you can see this in this picture right here. There's a star right there. The star, they're pretty much famous for identifying and discovering the star Sirius. Okay, the Dogon tribe have, astronomy down to a science. Okay, so they are able to study the stars and then look at the universe and tell the positioning of the stars and actually identify what those stars are. They have this spiritualness about them and this mystique that is with their tribe, and they use that to their advantage. A lot of them had moved into the hills, you know what I'm saying, to escape Arab, Islamic, Arab slave traders coming in trying to convert them to Islam. So they move into the hills, and you can see these Arabs right here trying to, force Islam by death onto the Africans. And a lot of these Dogon tribes had escaped this by moving into the hill mountain area and protecting their lands. And they had a lot of protection from the government. And they still practice a lot of their tradition, African traditions that they got from the Nile Valley culture, and they show it on display. A lot of people go, see them on tour. When tourists come in and they give a little, dance and stuff like that, they put on a show to, keep up their economics. That's how they, provide for their tribes and things of that nature. But you can tell the influence that they had on other areas where they were looking at the Numos. The Numos were these fish-like, creatures that the Dogon had, the Dogon griots had spoke on, that they were the ones who were the ancient beginnings of time and how civilization was created. These are images that were carved in Sumeria, which is modern day Iraq, and people call it Mesopotamia. But you see the Uraeus sun disk right above the headdress with the numos right there, the fish-like, characters where they wearing the fish garb, and they're pretty much telling you that the Dogon was trying to say that civilization started from amphibious beings who then evolved, and we evolved out of water. If you look at the world is like 75% water and about 25% land. So from that perspective, there are more creatures in the sea as opposed to on land, and it makes sense, where you make that connection with the amphibious fish, and human beings evolving from that. So that's what the Dogon and the Numos were famous for, having that griot story, that they had pretty much passed down from generation to generation to tell about the creation of human civilization and how it all began. And they kind of gave that insight from the astronomy, and they made that connection with how the astronomy and the astrology rather had innovated and evolved into this amphibious landscape. So you see that in movies today. I don't know if you ever seen that movie Mars. I can't remember the name of it, but they had went to Mars, and then they had met up with the aliens, and the aliens told the story of how human life was created from a spark from the universe, and then it was a spark that created life form, and it was into the water, and then it evolved from fish, and then eventually on land, and the legs developed as evolved, so a lot of that stuff came from the Dogon traditional oral traditions from the griots that they were speaking on. And you see the connection with Kemet, with the Dogon, and the star Sirius. This is, Khufu's pyramid, which is positioned in Giza, and it'll show you the king's chamber pointing towards Orion's belt, as well as Sirius, the star Sirius. And that's what the Dogon was talking about with Sirius, and the queen's chamber is pointing towards Draco, the dragon. That's the Kundalini energy. Okay, so the connection with Kemet and Western Africa is there, but a lot of people will see it as some weird concoction, because they can't really phantom or give the credit to African people for coming up with this knowledge base, and they can't see how Africans will have such you know incredible knowledge coming from a tribe of Africans who they consider is what do you call it, um man, primal or something to that effect, not educated or not civilized according to European standards. So when they have African tribes who come up with this incredible knowledge and understanding of the universe and stars and astrology, they try to downplay it. The European will try to downplay it because they didn't come up with it. You know what I'm saying? They didn't identify it. So they don't want to give the credit where credit is due to, to the Africans, and let the world know that the Africans were the ones who discovered a lot of this information, and they just take the information, change the name of it, give it to another generation through generational indoctrination, and then they marginalize the Africans, contributions to that knowledge and information, and then they make them out to be, just uncivilized, tribal, you know, weak African, tribes that really don't know anything. So that's what the white European does. And then they do stuff like this, and they say, oh, aliens must have came into the world, and that's how they came, so they'll give credit to aliens and all this, that, and the third, but they won't give credits to the African, who discovered the knowledge. But I'm going to give credit to the Africans, and I'm going to give it credit to the Africans and let you all know that a great source or resource that you can read is The Royal Kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai by Patricia and Frederick McKissick. They have a great book that they've written. I would recommend you go out and purchase that book and take a read. And the second resource I would definitely recommend is The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Go and pick up that book. This is my number one recommendation. Every time anybody asks me what book should I read and start with, I would say start with this book right here. You know what I'm saying? So go out and purchase The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Get to know African history, get to know and understand what the Africans had, contributions that we had in Africa. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the lesson for today, man. West Africa, man. You got to go and check out and dig a little bit deeper, do a bit more research. We just gave you a brief overview of West African history, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson. You can go out and discover more. You know, Recommend go and get those books. Get those books, read them, and then study more on African history in the West, Western region. Ghana, Mali, Songhay, Angola, and get to know, that African history for yourself. All right. So dig, like I said, man, this has been a Maarifa moment. You know what I'm saying? So go over to maarifasar.com. The video is almost over. We need you to get over there right now. Don't forget, take advantage of the 15% off discount that is happening through the holidays right now. Go ahead and get you something fly and fresh for the wintertime and take advantage of those discounts while they last. You know what I'm saying? So dig, this has been another Maarifa moment where knowledge has been reborn. So remember, the more you know, the more you'll grow, and the better off we all shall be. So until next time, I'll say love and light. Peace. Let's go.
We made it. We made it. Live at Seneferu's Pyramid. Okay. Seneferu built this